It's past midnight, the house is quiet, and my cousin whispers a plan that makes my skin crawl. I said no, simple as that, and walked away thinking the storm was over. Next thing I know, my name's dragged through the mud and fingers point at me like I'm the villain. Stick around, you're about to see how one stupid choice turned into a full-blown family witch hunt. My name is Chloe, and at 32 years old, I never imagined my own family, the people who were supposed to be my bedrock, would be the ones to tear my world apart. I'd always been the responsible one, the steady hand, the person everyone could count on. But when I drew a line in the sand to protect my 17-year-old cousin, Jess, she didn't just step over it. She lit a fire and tried to burn my entire life to the ground with one catastrophic lie. That night hit me like a ton of bricks, a blindside collision I never saw coming. The accusation she leveled against me wasn't just a lie, it was a character assassination, a poison that seeped into the very foundation of our family, turning people I loved into strangers overnight. They chose to believe her, no questions asked, casting me as the monster in a story she'd invented out of spite. Before I unpack this whole nightmare, do me a favor and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you've ever felt the sting of betrayal from someone you thought had your back, hit that like button and subscribe. Your support means more than you know as I share how my world shattered and how I fought to find the truth in the wreckage. But what she accused me of the next morning, you won't believe it. Our family had always been the kind you see in cheesy holiday movies. We weren't perfect, but we were close, woven together by a tapestry of shared memories and unbreakable traditions. Every Sunday, without fail, the clan would descend upon my Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark's house for dinner. The air would be thick with the smell of my aunt's roast chicken and the chaotic symphony of overlapping conversations. Phones were forbidden at the table, a rule enforced by my grandfather with mock severity. It was our time to connect, to rib each other, to share the small victories and frustrations of the week. Holidays were a whole other level of organized chaos. Thanksgiving was a 3-day marathon of cooking and eating, and Christmas was a spectacle of twinkling lights and a Secret Santa exchange that grew more elaborate with each passing year. In this tight-knit world, my cousin Jess and I had grown up more like sisters than cousins. Being 15 years her senior, I naturally fell into the cool older mentor. When she was a little girl, I was the one who taught her how to braid hair and let her win at Mario Kart. As she navigated the treacherous waters of her teenage years, I became her confidant. I helped her with her college application essays, gave her rides when her parents were busy, and offered advice on everything from friend drama to what to wear to her first formal dance. Chloe's the only one who actually gets it, she'd tell her mom, Aunt Carol, and hearing it always warmed my heart. We were thick as thieves. Until we weren't. The change was gradual, a slow erosion I barely noticed at first. Over the past year, the sweet, bubbly kid I adored began to retreat, replaced by a sullen teenager who communicated in monosyllables and eye rolls. Her world shrank to the glowing screen of her phone, and her old friends from the debate team were replaced by a new crowd led by a girl named Maya. From what I gathered, Maya was the kind of teenager who mistakes rebellion for personality. She was all ripped jeans, heavy eyeliner, and a practiced air of disdain for anyone over the age of 20. Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark were worried sick. Jess's grades started to slip, she began pushing boundaries, and the arguments in their house became a regular occurrence. "You're trying to ruin my life." She'd scream at them, "Just let me live." They were at their wits' end. They grounded her, took away her phone, tried everything to rein her in, but each punishment only fueled her defiance. I tried to be the bridge, the neutral territory between her and her parents. When she'd complain to me about how controlling they were, I'd listen, nod sympathetically, but also gently remind her that their rules came from a place of love. "They just want to keep you safe, Jess," I'd say. "They're not trying to suffocate you." "Whatever, Chloe," she'd scoff, the words laced with a new kind of venom. "You used to understand. Now you just sound like them." That stung, but I chalked it up to classic teenage angst. I remembered being 17, feeling like the world was a cage and I was the only one who could see the bars. So I tried to be patient, to give her space, to weather the storm of her moods. Meanwhile, my own life was finally falling into place. After years of grinding away at a marketing firm, I'd finally saved enough to put a down payment on a small condo in the city. It was my sanctuary, a quiet space that was all mine. I was dating a wonderful man, Liam, a high school history teacher with a kind heart and a laugh that could fill a room. Things were good, stable. I was happy. Looking back, maybe that was part of the problem. My stability seemed to highlight her chaos, and my contentment must have felt like a judgment on her misery. There were little warning signs, red flags I dismissed as insignificant at the time. She started asking me to cover for her, to tell her parents she was sleeping over at my place when she was really going to a party with Maya. I always said no, trying to explain that I couldn't lie to her parents, that their trust in me was important. Each refusal was a small chip in the foundation of our relationship. The warmth that had defined our bond was cooling, replaced by a resentful chill. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with an unreadable expression, a mix of disappointment and something else, something that looked almost like calculation. I never could have fathomed where that resentment would lead, or how utterly it would destroy the family I held so dear. So when Jess asked me to help that night, it felt small, but it wasn't. The night everything changed started like any other Friday. My parents were out of town visiting old college friends, and my Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark were attending a charity gala for his law firm. Jess was supposed to be staying at my condo for the night, a change of pace from her usual weekend groundings, a small olive branch from her parents that I had encouraged. I'd made her favorite pasta, we'd watched a movie, and by 11, I was ready for bed. I was just brushing my teeth when she appeared in the bathroom doorway, her phone clutched in her hand, her eyes wide with a desperate energy. "I need a huge favor," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the running water. She glanced nervously down the hallway, as if her parents could materialize out of thin air. "What's up?" I asked, rinsing my toothbrush. "Everything okay?" "Maya's friend is having a party, like the party of the year," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Everyone is going to be there. I have to go, Chloe. I just have to." I sighed, turning off the tap. I already knew where this was going. "Jess, you know your parents would kill you. They'd kill me. You're supposed to be here, grounded but not grounded." "That's why I need your help," she pressed, stepping closer. Her eyes were pleading. "They'll never know. I just need you to cover for me. If they call, just tell them I went to bed early with a headache. Maya's brother can pick me up down the block, and I swear I'll be back before sunrise. They'll never, ever find out." "Absolutely not, Jess. No way," I said, my voice firm. A familiar mix of frustration and protectiveness washed over me. It wasn't just about the lying. It was about her safety. I didn't want to get caught, and I didn't trust the plan. "I don't know these people, I don't know this party, and I'm responsible for you tonight. The answer is no." Her face fell, the pleading expression instantly hardening into a cold mask of fury. "Come on, Chloe. I'd do it for you. It's not a big deal." "It is a big deal," I countered, trying to keep my voice low but steady. "These parties, they can get out of hand. There's drinking, there are older guys, all sorts of things can go wrong. I can't let you walk into that." "I'm not a baby," she hissed, her voice rising in pitch. "God, everyone treats me like I'm some fragile little doll. I can take care of myself." "I know you think you can, but part of my job as your older cousin who loves you is to stop you from making stupid mistakes. There will be other parties, Jess, ones your parents actually let you go to." Her eyes narrowed into slits, and the look she gave me was genuinely chilling. It was pure, unadulterated rage. "You used to be cool," she spat. "You used to be on my side. Now you're just another boring adult trying to control me." "I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to protect you, and I'm not going to lie to your parents for you." "Fine," she snarled, the word sharp and final. "Be that way. But you'll be sorry. I thought you were my family." With that, she spun around and stormed down the hall, slamming the guest room door behind her. I stood there for a long moment, the echo of the slam reverberating in the quiet apartment. I let out a long breath, telling myself it was just teenage drama. She was angry. She'd get over it by morning. It was the right thing to do, I reasoned. I was being the responsible adult. I had no idea that her threat wasn't just the empty tantrum of a blorted teenager. It was a promise. I thought saying no would shut the door. Instead, it threw the match. The next morning, the atmosphere in my condo was thick with unspoken hostility. Jess emerged from the guest room looking like a thundercloud, her movements jerky and aggressive. She avoided my eyes, barely grunting in response to my cheerful good morning. At the breakfast table, she scrolled furiously through her phone, her thumb tapping out angry messages, a scowl etched onto her face. I tried to bridge the gap, asking about her friends, about school, but my questions were met with a wall of silence. When Aunt Carol came to pick her up around noon, Jess practically bolted out the door without a word of thanks or goodbye. I watched them drive away, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. I told myself she was just being a teenager, still fuming about the party. I decided to give her space, let her cool off. Later that afternoon, I was at the grocery store, trying to decide between salmon and chicken for dinner when my phone rang. It was my mom. Her voice, usually so warm and bubbly, was tight, strained. "Chloe, you need to come over to Carol and Mark's house, right now." "Mom, what's wrong? You sound weird." "Just come, now." She hung up before I could ask another question. A cold dread washed over me. Something was terribly wrong. I abandoned my shopping cart in the middle of the aisle and rushed to my car, my heart pounding against my ribs. The 10-minute drive to my aunt and uncle's house felt like an eternity. My mind raced through a dozen terrible scenarios. Was someone hurt? Was there an accident? When I pulled up to their house, my sense of dread deepened. My parents' car was in the driveway, along with my grandparents' sedan. An impromptu family meeting on a Saturday afternoon was unheard of, reserved only for the gravest of news. I walked up to the front door and knocked, my hand trembling slightly. My Uncle Mark opened the door. His face, usually so quick to smile, was a thunderous mask of rage. He didn't say a word, just stared at me with an expression of such profound loathing that I physically recoiled. He jerked his head, motioning for me to come inside, led me into the living room. The scene that greeted me was surreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My entire family was there. My parents, my grandparents, Aunt Carol, all seated in a semicircle, their faces grim and funereal. The air in the room was suffocating, heavy with a tension so thick it felt like I was wading through water. Aunt Carol was on the couch, her face pale and blotchy, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen from crying. My mother sat ramrod straight in an armchair, staring at a spot on the carpet, refusing to look at me. My father's jaw was clenched so tightly a muscle pulsed in his cheek. No one spoke. It was the small cuts, the cold shoulders from the night before, amplified into a full-blown amputation. These people, who had been my staunchest allies my entire life, were looking at me like I was a stranger, a monster. I remembered then, a flash of a memory from the night before. A notification had popped up on my phone from Jess, just a preview of a message. But when I'd unlocked my phone to read it, it was gone. She had unsent it. A deleted message, a missing clue. It was a fleeting thought, quickly swallowed by the rising panic. Then the accusation showed up, and it changed everything. "What's going on?" I finally managed to ask, my voice sounding small and foreign in the oppressive silence. "Is everyone okay?" Aunt Carol looked up at me, and her face crumpled. "How could you?" she whispered, her voice breaking as a fresh wave of sobs shook her body. Uncle Mark's face darkened even further. He pointed to a single armchair that had been set apart from the rest of the group, as if I were a defendant in a courtroom. "Sit down, Chloe." My legs felt like lead as I moved to the chair, my mind spinning with confusion. What had I done? Was this about the party? Had Jess lied and said I'd agreed to help her? "I don't understand," I said, looking from face to face, searching for a glimmer of clarity. "Don't play dumb," Uncle Mark snarled, his voice low and dangerous. "Jess told us. She told us everything that happened last night at your apartment." A chill traced its way down my spine. Everything about what? About her wanting to go to a party? I told her no. She was mad, but that's all that happened. My aunt let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. Her voice, when she spoke, was trembling with a mixture of grief and fury. She told us how you came into her room last night after she went to bed, how you touched her, how you tried. She couldn't finish the sentence, dissolving into tears again, burying her face in her hands. The words hung in the air, grotesque and unbelievable. Sexual assault. My own cousin. The room began to tilt, the walls closing in. It felt like the air had been sucked from my lungs. That's insane," I stammered, shaking my head in disbelief. "That is a complete and utter lie. I never went near her room. She's making this up because I wouldn't let her sneak out." "Stop lying," Uncle Mark roared, taking a menacing step towards me. My dad shot up from his chair, placing a restraining hand on his brother's chest. Jess would never, ever make up something like this. She was hysterical, traumatized. "Where is she?" I demanded, a frantic energy surging through me. "Let me talk to her. This is a lie, and she knows it." "She's at Maya's house," Aunt Carol said, her voice muffled by her hands. "We couldn't let her stay here, knowing you were coming. She's terrified of you, Chloe." I looked desperately around the room, my eyes pleading with my parents. "Mom, Dad, you can't believe this. You know me. You know who I am." My mother finally looked at me, but her eyes were cold, distant. My father's face was an unreadable mask of stone. The people I loved, my own parents, were picking a side, and it wasn't mine. When the people you love pick a side, what do you hold on to? "Last night," I said, fighting to keep my voice from breaking, "Jess asked me to cover her so she could sneak out." I said no. She got furious with me. She told me I would be sorry. This is that. This is her getting revenge. "How dare you try to turn this around and blame her?" Aunt Carol cried, her head snapping up. "My daughter is not a liar." "She described it all," Uncle Mark added, his voice dripping with ice. Details that only someone who was there, who experienced it, would know." "What details?" I challenged, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Because whatever she told you is pure fiction. I was cleaning up the kitchen after she went to her room, and then I went to my own room and went to bed. I have phone records, texts with Liam. I can prove it." "You were up for a while after she went to her room," my mother said quietly, her first direct contribution to the conversation. Her words felt like a stab wound. I stared at her, aghast. I was loading the dishwasher and texting Liam. That's it. Jess's room is at the other end of the hall. I never went down there. "She said it happened then," Uncle Mark stated, as if this were an open and shut case. "She heard you moving around and thought you were going to bed, and then you came into her room." "This is a nightmare," I whispered, panic rising in my throat like bile. I would never, ever do something like that, not to anyone, and certainly not to my 17-year-old cousin who I love like a sister. She is lying to you to get back at me. The silence that followed was my verdict. It was suffocating, damning. I tried to show the truth, but then I found out something that flipped the whole thing on its head. In the days that followed, my life became a waking nightmare. My parents asked me to stay with a friend for a while, to give everyone some space. It wasn't a request. It was an eviction. I packed a bag in a daze, the weight of their suspicion pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. I moved into my friend Alex's spare room, feeling like a refugee in my own life. Alex, thankfully, didn't hesitate for a second. "This is insane, Chloe," he'd said the moment I tearfully explained what was happening. "Anyone who knows you knows this is a lie. You've got a place here for as long as you need it." He was one of the few. The family gossip mill had churned into overdrive. I was blocked on social media by my aunt, my uncle, and a cascade of other relatives. The family group chat, once a source of lighthearted banter, was now a silent testament to my exile. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in months texted me, "I always knew there was something off about you. You're sick." My grandmother, who used to call me every Sunday, left a single tearful voicemail. "I don't know what to believe, Chloe. My heart is broken." The betrayal was a constant, dull ache, but the fear was a sharp, stabbing pain. An accusation like this doesn't just stay in the family. It bleeds out. It taints everything. I lived in a state of perpetual anxiety, my phone a source of constant dread. Every notification made my heart leap into my throat. Would it be the police? A reporter? My boss? I had to tell Liam. That conversation was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I sat across from him in a quiet coffee shop, my hands shaking as I laid out the ugly, unbelievable story. I watched his face for any flicker of doubt, any shadow of suspicion. But he just listened, his expression softening with empathy. When I finished, he reached across the table and took my hands. "I know you," he said, his voice firm and unwavering. "And I know you would never, ever do that. We'll fight this, together." His belief was a tiny island of sanity in an ocean of madness. With Alex and Liam as my war counsel, I started to fight back. I couldn't let this lie become my reality. My first step was to retrace every minute of that Friday night. I pulled up my phone records, my text conversations with Liam, my social media activity. I had a solid, time-stamped alibi for most of the night, but there was still that window, the time after Jess went to her room and before I went to bed. Her word against mine. It wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed a witness. My mind kept going back to my condo building. The walls were thin. Who might have heard something? Or, more importantly, not heard something? A struggle, a scream, a raised voice? Surely someone would have noticed. Then I remembered Mrs. Gable, the sweet elderly woman who lived in the apartment directly below mine. She was a light sleeper and notoriously nosy. If anyone would have heard a pin drop, it was her. My hands trembled as I dialed her number. "Mrs. Gable, it's Chloe from upstairs," I began, my voice unsteady. I explained that there was a family issue and I needed to verify some timing from Friday night. I asked her if she'd heard anything unusual, any loud noises or strange sounds coming from my apartment. "Oh dear, no," she said, her voice crackling over the phone. "It was quiet as a mouse up there. The only thing I heard was you locking your front door when you took your trash out late. Must have been around 10:30 or so." My heart stopped. "I didn't take the trash out, Mrs. Gable." "Oh, well, I'm sure I heard your door. A young girl came out, very quiet, carrying a backpack. I just assumed it was your guest taking out the recycling." The pieces clicked into place with dizzying speed. Jess. She hadn't just wanted to sneak out, she'd actually done it. She had waited until she thought I was asleep, and then she'd left. She wasn't in my condo when the alleged assault was supposed to have happened. She was at that party. "Mrs. Gable," I said, my voice shaking with a new kind of energy, "would you be willing to write that down for me? What you saw and what time you saw it?" She agreed without hesitation. It was the first solid piece of evidence I had, a crack in the wall of Jess's lie. It felt like finding a lifeline in a river that was trying to pull me under. Alex, my ever-practical ally, took it a step further. He was a social media wizard, and he went to work. "Let's find this party," he said, his fingers flying across his keyboard. He searched for Maya, Jess's supposed best friend. Her profiles were private, but Maya had tagged her friends in public photos from other events. It was a digital breadcrumb trail. Within an hour, he found it, a public Instagram story from Maya's older brother. It was a video time-stamped at 1:15 a.m. Saturday morning. In the background, blurry but unmistakable, was Jess. She was laughing, a red plastic cup in her hand, her arms slung around a boy I'd never seen before. I stared at the screenshot, a volatile mix of rage and vindication coursing through me. She wasn't in my apartment, traumatized and terrified. She was at a party, living the life she'd been so desperate to have, while mine was being systematically destroyed. We had the truth, we had the proof, we had one shot to turn the tide, but the other side had a move I never saw coming. Armed with Mrs. Gable's written statement and the screenshot from the party, I knew a confrontation was inevitable. This couldn't be handled over the phone or through text messages. They had condemned me in person, they would hear the truth in person. I called my parents. "I have proof," I said, my voice devoid of the pleading tone they'd heard before. "I want the family at Aunt Carol's tomorrow at noon. Everyone who was there on Saturday needs to be there tomorrow." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before my father reluctantly agreed. I walked into that living room the next day feeling like a gladiator entering an arena. The atmosphere was just as hostile as before, but this time I wasn't unarmed. Alex and Liam were waiting in the car outside, my support system on standby. I had told them I needed to do this part alone. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady, my gaze sweeping across the room, meeting each of their accusatory stares. "You've all listened to Jess's story. Now you're going to listen to mine, and you're going to look at my evidence." Uncle Mark started to interrupt, a dismissive sneer on his face. "We're not interested in your fabricated—" "You will be silent and you will listen," I cut him off, my voice sharp as glass. The unexpected force of it stunned the room into silence. One by one, I laid out the facts. I presented Mrs. Gable's signed and dated statement, describing how she saw Jess sneaking out of my apartment at 10:30. I passed my phone around, showing them the screenshot of Jess at the party, time-stamped in the middle of the night. "She wasn't in my guest room, cowering in fear," I said, my voice ringing with cold fury. "She was at a party, the very party I told her she couldn't go to." Aunt Carol's face went white as a sheet. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My father stared at the phone, then at me, a dawning horror in his eyes. The foundation of their certainty was crumbling before my eyes. "I want her down here," I said, my eyes locking on my uncle's. "I want Jess to come down here and explain this to me, to all of us." Uncle Mark, looking shaken for the first time, hesitated for a moment before turning and trudging up the stairs. A few minutes later, Jess appeared in the doorway. When she saw me, her defiant expression faltered. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the shocked faces of her parents, the evidence on my phone still being passed from hand to hand. "Jess," I said, calmly, "tell me about the party." Her face crumpled. She looked at her mother, then her father, searching for an ally, for someone to rescue her. But their faces held only confusion and devastation. The lie was too big, the proof too damning. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. "Don't you?" I pressed, taking a step forward. "Because this looks a lot like you. And Mrs. Gable, our downstairs neighbor, seems to remember you leaving my apartment pretty late on Friday night." That's when the real reason, the twisted motive, came spilling out. It wasn't just simple revenge. It was something more pathetic, more desperate. It turned out Maya had told her that if she couldn't even sneak out for one party, she was pathetic, that her cool older cousin was a controlling loser. Maya had threatened to cut her off. Panicked at the thought of losing her new social status, Jess had snuck out. When she got home late Saturday morning, her parents had already heard from my mom that she'd been sick and had been in her room all night. She had an alibi. But then they started questioning her. They noticed she seemed off, tired, and smelled faintly of smoke. The questions became more pointed, and Jess, terrified of being caught, of the monumental trouble she was in, panicked. She reached for the most explosive, most life-altering lie she could think of, a lie that would not only get her out of trouble for sneaking out, but would also punish me for saying no and simultaneously paint her as a tragic victim in the eyes of her friends. She threw me on a grenade to save herself from getting grounded. "Is it true?" Aunt Carol whispered, her voice a fragile thread. "Jess, did you lie about Chloe?" Jess's silence was her confession. Then a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. A wave of shouts and recriminations filled the room. Uncle Mark yelled, demanding to know why. Aunt Carol was sobbing uncontrollably. My parents were just staring, shocked. In the middle of the chaos, as I watched the family I loved tear itself apart over a lie born of teenage vanity and cowardice, a single, chilling question echoed in my mind. Is winning the argument worth losing the family? The truth was out, but the damage felt irreparable. Just when I thought the worst was behind me, I got a text that changed the game. The confession didn't bring the wave of relief I had expected. There was no cathartic moment of apology, no rush of my family to beg for forgiveness. Instead, after Jess was sent to her room amidst a storm of tears and shouts, a strange and unsettling quiet fell over the living room. It was the quiet of shock, of shame, but also of something else, a desperate scramble to manage the fallout. My father was the first to speak, his voice heavy with a forced sense of authority. "This has been a terrible ordeal for everyone," he began, choosing his words with agonizing care. "Now that the truth is out, we need to focus on how we move forward, as a family." I stared at him, dumbfounded. "Move forward? Just like that? Dad, for the last week, you all thought I was a monster. You kicked me out of my own home." "Chloe, we know you're hurt," my mother said, her tone gentle but placating, as if I were the one who needed to be calmed down. "But holding on to this anger isn't healthy. We all need to heal." "Holding on to anger?" I repeated, my voice rising with incredulity. "It's been less than an hour since you found out I was innocent. Forgive me if I haven't had time to heal from being accused of a felony by my own cousin and abandoned by my entire family." Aunt Carol, who had been crying silently into a tissue, looked up. Her voice was thick with emotion, but it wasn't directed at me. "Brianna made a horrible mistake. But she's just a child, Chloe. She's 17. She's so fragile right now." The attempt to re-center Jess as the primary victim was so audacious it left me breathless. "Fragile?" I countered. "She was strategic. She knew exactly what she was doing. She built a lie that was designed to destroy my life, and it almost worked." "Of course what she did was wrong," Uncle Mark conceded, his tone already shifting from rage at his daughter's lie to defensiveness of her actions. "And believe me, she will be punished. But you have to understand the pressure kids are under these days. It's a different world." The excuses were piling up, forming a protective wall around Jess, while I was left standing in the rubble of what she'd done. The text I received an hour later, after I had walked out of that house and driven back to Alex's apartment, was from my uncle. It wasn't an apology. It was an admonition. "I hope you're happy, Chloe. You may have proven your point, but you've torn this family apart." That text was the moment I understood. They weren't sorry they had wronged me. They were sorry they had been caught. They were sorry for the mess, for the drama, for the ugliness of it all. My innocence was just an inconvenient plot twist in their family drama. The bell had been rung, and in their minds, I was the one who had swung the rope. You can't unring a bell. The damage was done, and the sound would echo for years. In the weeks that followed, the family tried to paper over the gaping chasm Jess's lie had created. I was invited back to Sunday dinners. Phone calls resumed. But it was all a performance. The apologies I did receive were flimsy and self-serving. "We're so sorry for what you went through," was the common refrain, a passive construction that avoided any admission of their own role in my suffering. It was never, "We are so sorry we failed you. We are sorry we didn't believe you. We are sorry we threw you out." Jess was grounded indefinitely and had her phone taken away for a month, a slap on the wrist for attempted character assassination. She mumbled a "sorry" to me over a bowl of mashed potatoes at our first post-confession dinner, her eyes fixed on her plate. I just nodded, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Forgiveness felt like a distant country I had no visa for. My mother pulled me aside that night in the kitchen. "I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive her soon, honey," she whispered. "For your own sake. Holding a grudge will only eat you up inside." They wanted me to be the bigger person, to absorb the blow and smooth things over for the sake of family harmony. But I couldn't. Every time I looked at them, all I could see were the faces that had judged me, condemned me, and cast me out without a second thought. The trust was gone, shattered into a million pieces. How do you rebuild a house when the foundation has turned to dust? I realized that sometimes the only way to survive is to walk away from the wreckage. I had to choose myself over the twisted, broken version of family they were trying to sell me. If this happened to you, would you forgive or walk away? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The path I chose wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I'll share the text receipts and the moment that finally cleared my name in the next video. Tell me if you want receipts.